Long-running shonen are often criticized for being long-running shonen because they tend to fall into one of several traps of the genre as they progress, either becoming too repetitive and predictable in their structure, or simply running out of things to do with their initial concepts. I've always held that One Piece outclasses most of the field when it comes to upholding the promises that the story makes to you in the early chapters. It sets up the goal of the series, finding One Piece, but it also sets up a more personal goal for the main character, namely becoming a strong pirate and returning Shanks' straw hat. And the series takes detours, but not ones that make it seem like we're just filling time. Luffy's journey is simply big enough that it was always going to take a while, despite what the author may have thought. I say this because while it's still true that One Piece achieves what it sets out to do, I just watched Hunter x Hunter, a show I'd heard about for a long time, but I don't think it was clearly communicated to me just how good it is. Like a lot of people, my introduction to anime and manga was through Dragon Ball initially and then the big three afterwards. And like a lot of people, once I found the seasonal shows at a period of anti-shonen elitism. And it was in this period I first became aware of Hunter x Hunter. A friend recommended it to me and I Google image searched and very literally judged it by the cover. The first thing that turned me off was the fact that the main character seems to be trying to hide the fact that he's wearing a crop top by giving himself a wedgie. That's a weird call for an MC uniform there. But aside from his admittedly unique attire, most of the characters looked like ones I'd seen before. There was the main guy who's happy and innocent, that's your Goku clone. There's a pale kid with his hands in his pockets, which is anime shorthand for the cool guy. And then there was obviously the obligatory female character, as well as the mentor figure. The series started around the same time as Naruto and One Piece, so my expectations were that it would be a similar story. And in a way it was, in the early stages, except I felt that I understood it a lot less somehow. Gon was introduced much like expected. It's essentially the same setup as Pokemon. Gon's aunt phrases it in a way that blames the dad, and Gon's response sets up his character's unwavering optimism well early on, though it's not clear yet that Gon's character is an actual plot point, not just a copy-paste of Son Goku. I wasn't particularly impressed with anything that happened on Whale Island my first time through. Luckily, the show didn't seem to be either, since it finished in like half an episode, but the Hunter exam ended up confusing me more. We meet Killua, who I couldn't figure out. He's essentially presented as a child who's also a badass assassin, but I'm not expecting character nuance in my shonen, so to me he seemed inconsistent. Badass in one moment and then a child in the next. In hindsight, it sounds obvious he should be both a child and a badass assassin, but if you think of the cool archetype from shonen, they rarely have any childlike qualities. Think Sasuke or Kun, if you've read Tower of God. Gon at this point starts showing more weird inconsistencies as well, like the fact that he doesn't at any point express any concern over Killua's murderous tendencies. If you were really paying attention your first time through the series, I suspect you'd catch a lot of this as character building rather than inconsistencies. In this case, Leorio and Kurapika play the straight men with more appropriate reactions, but if your expectations aren't very high, you might miss it. I dropped the show like 4 times throughout the first 25 episodes because I was nitpicking these imaginary flaws. People say the first couple of arcs of Hunter x Hunter are slow, and they're sort of right, but it's paradoxical because the plot lines are moving a lot faster early on. So what they mean is, while the plot is progressing quickly, that's not where the show's quality lies. That comes later in the form of incredibly well-realized character development and plots that shine by being driven by the characters involved, rather than the outside forces of the Hunter examiners and the Soltec family. And even the circumstances of Heaven's Arena. There's sort of antagonists of those arcs, but not really. The best antagonists of the series are as much the main characters of their arcs as the protagonists are, leading, at least in my case, to a strong sense of empathy for all sides of all conflicts. The climaxes of the stories are that much more impactful when you can't see the solution ahead of time because you don't want either side to just win. Then to add another layer, when the curtain falls back and we fully realize the nature of the main characters and the villains, we also see how well they mirror each other. Crollo in character for Gon and Meruem in progression. It's nothing new to have your antagonist mirror an aspect of the protagonist, but too often that'll be their only character trait. Most of the villains in One Piece are a mirror to Luffy. He represents freedom and they represent authority in some way. But they're also introduced as kings or agents of the government, so that's how we come to know those characters, in opposition to Luffy. In Hunter x Hunter, the characters are introduced first and then later revealed to be different from how we initially saw them. And not with the traditional moment before death flashbacks, but with believable development and revelations within the timeline of the stories. And it's only once you've seen all of these revelations that you can fully appreciate the seeds that are planted in the early arcs. In hindsight, the Hunter exam and the Soldic family arc are crucial in their character details and in the foreshadowing that serve to make later progression of plot and character so much more plausible. As much as I adore One Piece, the sheer ambitiousness of Hunter x Hunter and its story and its characters puts it in a different category to me. Not necessarily because it's better, but because it's attempting to do a thing that none of the rest of the shonen lineup are trying to do. I can think of one arc in Hunter x Hunter that ends with a climactic battle between the main character and the antagonist of that arc. The 6 other arcs in the story subvert that tradition. Like, imagine Luffy or Naruto not fighting the next 6 main antagonists in their respective series. Luffy's sort of on track right now actually, but I doubt he'll go for 6 arcs. My point is not really to argue which approach is better, only that if you haven't given Hunter x Hunter a shot because it's a long shonen and you're already reading 4 of those, if you're slightly bored of the shonen tropes but you enjoy the emotion those stories can provoke, I think you're exactly the target audience of this series. And I have not yet met someone who has seen it who didn't like it, so give it a shot. Thank you for listening.